everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on part 58 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and the mood of this volume is nervousness. Anime Annie was talking in their comment, which I'll talk about some comments here shortly, saying that this story finds a way to make you nervous in ways you didn't think you could become nervous, and I'm wholeheartedly agreeing. I love Volume 6 so far. There's been revelations, there's been horror, there's been romance. It's been a tour de force, and we are barely into it so far. I mean, we're a third into it, which is crazy to think, right? That we're a third of the way through this already. This volume's going by way too fast, but it's been really, really good. And it's been really, really tragic and nerve-wracking, so I'm not totally sad about that. But this volume's been crazy. And when we last left off, Bai Wusheng is all about Xie Lian just killing himself and becoming a ghost and being like, oh, well, you can kill me as a ghost and become a supreme. But the real thing I think is going to happen is he's trying to get Xie Lian to kill himself because Bai Wusheng can't kill him. And then if he kills himself and becomes a ghost, then Bai Wusheng can get rid of him and become this supreme that will terrorize all three realms. And that's the last thing that we want. Now, do I think Xie Lian's going to kill himself? No. But do I think that MXTX is going to put us through an entire volume and possibly 2 volumes for the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking moments before we get to that revelation? It seems like it's going down that road, so I'm a little bit nervous. But yes, I do have some comments I want to talk about before we dive into this novel. The manhwa chapter is not out yet, so that'll be out in next week's video, the new manhwa chapter, which is just coinciding with all the fun stuff happening with Qi Rong and Xie Lian and Hua Chong. Isn't that great? What fun times those were. So, I do have some comments I want to talk about. SQQLBH314 talked about the inspiration for the 10,000 God Cave, or the Magoa Cave, was actually the 1,000 Buddha Cave, and was primarily in Luoyang, China, and was one of the largest, most renowned cave complexes in China. And they sent a link to it, and there were some pictures of it, and it's actually really cool. And one thing I loved about the link was that the picture showing the cave and showing all the images of the deities and everything, it is exactly how I pictured reading the cave looking in my mind, based on the reading and based on the author's illustration or the artist's illustration. So I really liked that. I was like, it was one of those rare instances where you think of something while you're reading, and then when you're shown what the actual inspiration is, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Cool. Because that doesn't happen often. So I thought that was really neat. So thank you for that. And also, the shade. The shade of, we were talking about this in the comments, but Heshan, made 50 or so clones that have been in the heavenly realm, just walking around doing their business for hundreds of years. Nobody's noticed them. Nobody suspected them at all. They've been completely inconspicuous. Feng and Mu Qing can't make one clone that is not only not conspicuous, but that doesn't have a name that just points it right out there, right? So I thought that was some nice subtle shade that Heshan is like a much better person at making clones of themselves than these two boobs, but I thought that was really, really funny. Millipop states that the volcanic statues on Mount Tonglu, Anime Annie noted this as well, they look like the weeping angels in Doctor Who, and I was like, yes, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I agree, they do look like the weeping angels. It gives it that like nice little, it's a creep factor, but it's not like totally horrific, but it's just creepy in the right way. So I thought that was really cool. And then Xie Lian may not be an unreliable narrator, but he does tend to omit details, like within the Feng arc, which should have been a nice foreshadowing to this. And so how does that translate to now? And I like that. I like the idea that Xie Lian, it's not that he's an unreliable narrator, but he's leaving stuff out. He's choosing what to tell us and what not to tell us, which you could say is an unreliable narrator, but he's not lied to us yet. He just has been omitting information. And so I feel like that's going to come into play now. But so far, Xie Lian has had a reason to omit information. Like with the Feng arc, it didn't matter in the end. The Gilded Banquet still happened. It's just his involvement was kind of fictitious. And here, there's, I'm sure, a reason why Xie Lian has blocked out the most traumatic moments of his life. I can't imagine why. But it's going to be curious to see how that translates to now and him remembering it. So I thought that was really cool to bring up. Anime Annie notes that Volume 1, it's been so long since Volume 1, it's been a year, but they were talking about how Xie Lian's bad luck on the cart where they're rolling the dice, Xie Lian wanted to go to the right, but then, or wanted to go to the left, and Hua Chong was like, no, let's go this way. So it's like Xie Lian wanted to go one way, and then Hua Chong was like, no, my good luck will take us the other way. And then we see that paralleled in the cave when Xie Lian wants to go down one route, and Hua Chong's like, no, let's stay left and avoid all of this other stuff. So I thought that was a great callback, and now, as several of you have commented, going back and rewatching the Donghua, rereading volumes 1 and 2 is going to be a trip. And I feel like I should probably go back and relook at volumes 1 and 2 before we get to volumes 7 and 8. I feel like that should happen. I probably will, when we get to volume 7, I'll probably like stop before the discussion and reaction and reread those before starting that first reaction for volume 7. But that was cool. And then Kix K noted that Qi Rong, man, Qi Rong, this line, it got me. So if you've not read Modao Zushi, this will mean nothing to you. But Qi Rong, Kixke said, is a better father figure than most of the fathers in Modao Zushi. And for a second I was like, well, no. I was like, oh, the shade. So much shade thrown with these chapters. I was like, ooh, you're not right. Qi Rong is a better father figure than Daddy Jin. And I don't know how to take that. I was like, oh my God, yeah. I mean, you know, if you overlook the cannibalism and the cursing and the general lack of hygiene and lack of parental skills, then, you know, he does seem to care somewhat for Goozy, and that's more than we could say for some of the dads in Modao Zushi, so, ha-ha! I was like, oh my God, MXTX, what? I thought that was really great. MXTX, I like that Kix K pointed out, shapes the two cousins kind of as the antithesis of one another. Both Qi Rong and Xie Lian are out to change their image and improve it. Qi Rong wants respect as a savage ghost. He wants respect to be considered on par with the Three Supremes, which we all chuckle at and go, haha, sure. And then Xie Lian wants to have a better image of himself. He doesn't want to be the god of misfortune. He wants to be seen in a better light, which the heavenly officials all kind of chuckle at and go, sure. And so it's really interesting, but the thing about it is that Xie Lian and Qi Rong kind of go about it through different means, right? Qi Rong does these dastardly things to make himself look badass and impressive, and it does or doesn't work. And Xie Lian uses kindness to create this better image, and it does or doesn't work. So it's interesting to see the parallels between the two of them. They're just going in opposite ways. They're like perpendicular. It's cool, right? I really liked that being pointed out. And then finally, in the Donghua, for episodes 4 and 5, there's an added Donghua only scene, which again, I haven't read volume 1 in like a year fully all the way through. I just went back and looked at parts of it. But apparently there's a scene in between episodes 4 and 5 of the Donghua where Xie Lian thanks Feng Yang and Fu Yao, or Non-Feng and Fu Yao. He thanks them for their service, saying, tell your generals I said thanks. And now it's like, oh, Xie Lian knew that he was telling Mu Qing and Feng Xin thanks. He just couldn't say it. And so there's this really cool moment where you have Mu Qing and Feng Xin being like, oh, sure, we'll tell them. And, you know, on the one hand, feeling really happy that, you know, they're I'm trying to think of the opposite of subordinate, but that Xie Lian recognized them. But then there's a little bit of guilt there, being like, we can't soak it in and say, oh, thanks, no problem, because we're posing as somebody else. So I thought that was really cool. I liked all those comments. It's about 95 degrees Celsius here, so it's about like 100 with the heat index. My hair earlier was like sopping wet, and so I let it come in and cool off, and now it's just a big humid like fuzz ball. And I'm like, I feel like I'm in a kiln, but I'm not in the kiln of Mount Tonglu because we're not on top of a snow-casted mountain. So what can we do? Although, by the time we finish this story, it'll be probably around December or Christmas or January. So we're on top of a snow-covered mountain. That'd be kind of very thematic if we rounded out like the New Year and snow with Xie Lian and Hua Chong hopefully escaping from the kiln together. That's my dream. That's my goal. Hope that happens. It'd be very thematic and wonderful, but we'll just wait and see. So the chapters that we're looking at today are chapters 182 and 183. So we're still on 2 chapters. Starting next week, we'll be on a couple 3-chapter runs. So we're only doing, this is our last 2 chapters for a while. We don't have another 2 chapters since then. This will be the last one, and then next week will be 3 chapters. So, but as you know from last week, I talked for like an hour about 2 chapters. So why wouldn't I talk about that here? So we'll see. I've talked for 10 minutes, but I'm really excited. This flashback's already been really sad and melancholy. It's not the happy-go-lucky flashback that the Volume 2 arc was of, oh, the Prince of Shanla, everything's all right as rain. No, this is like the aftermath, and it's not so fun. But if we're going to get reveals, now's the time, so we'll see, right? We'll see. So we are going to start chapters 182 and 183 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 182, Hero Defeated by a Penny. Oh, so in the last couple chapters, Xie Lian gave the money to the man with the lanterns to save all of the souls within them, and Hua Chong just happened to be one of them. And now he's being defeated by the money, so it's like bad karma, like no good deed goes unpunished. All right. Before the entire city was locked down for a strict search, Xie Lian and company traveled all night and came to another city. He still settled the king and queen in a secluded place before himself and Feng went out to earn money. However, they couldn't earn much money in the other city. However, they who couldn't earn much money in the other city wouldn't magically be luckier in a new one. Yeah, so it's like they're just rinsing and repeating the same cycle while still trying to hide and not be caught. The two still worked a full day's labor only to earn meager pay like always, but since the group of 3 who had never left each other's side was suddenly missing a member, the other 2 were both having a hard time getting used to it. For example, in the past, it had always been Mu Qing who was responsible for keeping the money pouch, constantly keeping count. Now that Mu Qing had left, Feng straight up said he might lose the money pouch by accident, so Xie Lian had no choice but to keep it on his person. Every time he counted that sad bit of money, he couldn't believe it was all he earned after a hard day's labor. It must be known that in the past, the amount of money he granted beggars wasn't even this little. That hurts me a lot because we'll talk about it in the discussion, but the idea of Xie Lian, who's already in this depressed state, is now having to look at the lack of money that he has this entire time. And okay, we'll talk about it in the discussion. With Mu Qing gone, the one who brought food for the king and queen was also gone. So Xie Lian had no choice but take Feng with him and personally deliver all sorts of daily necessities to the king and queen's hiding place. That she could see her son so frequently, the queen was very happy, and when she got happy, she entered the kitchen. That day, she once again made Xie Lian and Feng her newly stewed soup, dragging them to the table. You both need to fatten up, look how thin you've become. Feng was streaming cold sweat. The moment his butt touched the bench, she bounced up, waving his hands. Oh, no, your majesty, Feng doesn't care, I absolutely mustn't. The queen chided pleasantly. My child, what's there to be afraid of? Come, sit down. How could Feng dare tell her? He really didn't dare, and after he forced himself to sit down, the queen delivered all the fruits of her labor. Feng inhaled sharply, removed the pot cover. Xie Lian sat at the head of the table, and when both of them saw what was in the pot, they both looked ghastly. Xie Lian said under his breath, this chicken died a tragic death. Feng lips trembled. Your Highness, you didn't see right. There's no chicken in this. Then what's that thing floating like a dead chicken? I think it's stew paste, but the shape is a little off. Oh no! The two studied the pot for a good while, but they still couldn't figure it out. The queen ladled a full bowl for Xie Lian, and Feng himself rushed to ladle himself a bowl. When the queen went to the back rooms to find the king, he instantly poured out the soup in their own bowls and pretended to wipe their mouths, looking as if they ate it up in one sip and hadn't had enough. Oh, I'm full. Seeing this, the queen was delighted. Oh, was it good? Oh, it was. Well, if it's good, then have some more. Xie Lian spat out a mouthful of the non-existent soup and raised a handkerchief to pretend he was wiping at his lips. Just then, the queen seemed to hesitate before speaking. My son, I want to ask you a question, but please don't think your mom is so nosy. What is it? Please ask. Where's that child, Mu Qing? How come he hasn't come the past few days? He knew it. Xie Lian's heart squeezed tighter at the mention of Mu Qing. Oh, I gave him a mission, so he's gone off elsewhere. The queen seemed to have breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. Then right after she asked, when will he be back? Oh, maybe he'll need to be out for a long time. He won't be back anytime soon. Hearing this, the queen seemed troubled, and Xie Lian noticed. So was something the matter? Oh, it's nothing. Feng was the sharper one. Suddenly he spoke up. Your Majesty, what's wrong with your hands? My hands? Xie Lian looked down and was instantly shocked. His mother's pair of delicate, exquisitely maintained, wealthy hands were, at this moment, looking rather horrifying. The joints were scraped and peeling. Oh, the queen's, and there were faint traces of blood. Xie Lian stopped abruptly and grabbed her hands. What's going on? Oh, it's nothing. I only washed some blankets and clothes. I'm not very good at it. Why are you doing the washing yourself? You could have... But he was stumped before he could finish his words. Could have what? Could have had the palace attendants do the washing? Could have had Mu Qing do the washing? All of that was impossible now. On the road of escape, if it had been Mu Qing who was the acting personal attendant, and his duties included taking care of all personal necessities, including the care for Xie Lian, the king, and the queen. With him gone, suddenly there's no one to attend to all the nitty-gritty. Wow, so Mu Qing was doing quite a lot. Quite a lot. We'll talk about this in the discussion, but ooh, now it's coming out in the wash. Okay. Literally. No one to cook, no one to wash, no one to fold the blankets. The simple days of the past had suddenly become difficult. Xie Lian himself was all right in suffering through it, since there were far too many other things to worry about. Oh, I hate that. But his mother, who had lived a comfortable, luxurious life, when had she ever done such crude labor? But if the queen didn't do this work herself, well, who else would take over? After some silence, Xie Lian said, "Oh, don't let this trouble you. I'll take care of the washing." The queen smiled. "Oh, no need. You just take care of yourself. You've done enough laundry. You've never done laundry nor cooked before. But since my time is free every day, doing the chores myself is still quite fun. Especially when you both enjoyed the meal. It makes me quite happy." That pot of soup was stewed by such a pair of hands like his mother's. Xie Lian and Feng exchanged a look and felt rather horrid. Just then the queen added, "Oh, yes, there was another thing. Is there any way you can bring some medicine back tomorrow?" Xie Lian's eyes widened slightly. "Medicine? What kind of medicine?" The queen's face was troubled. "Oh, I'm not quite sure either. Why don't you go to the pharmacy and inquire and see what kind of medicine should be taken for symptoms like coughing up blood?" "Coughing up blood?" Xie Lian was shocked. "Well, who's coughing up blood? You, your father? You, father? Why didn't you say something sooner?" His voice was raised, and the queen immediately hushed him. "Lower your voice." However, it was too late, and an outraged voice came out from the back of the cottage. "I told you not to say anything unnecessary." It was the king. Seeing he had already heard, the queen didn't worry over hushing anymore and called towards the back room. "Well, but it won't do if this keeps up." Xie Lian walked straight into the room and saw the king was huddled in a bed of ragged blankets. He hadn't looked closely recently, but now they saw the king was looking ill, his cheeks sunken, appearing even more sickly inside a gloomy room. There wasn't any kingly aura at all. He was nothing more than an ashen-faced old man. Xie Lian didn't need to check his pulse to know that he had been ill for some time, and nothing light either. In fact, the entire room was permeated with the suffocating, musty air of sickness. Recalling the queen had said the symptom was coughing up blood, in his moment of distress, his voice was raised. "What's going on here?" The king steeled his face. "What's with that tone?" Both the queen and Feng entered the room too. Xie Lian admonished, "Well, who cares what tone I'm using? If you're sick, why didn't you say something sooner?" The king was furious. "Are you lecturing your king? At any given time, what this king can and cannot say is not for you to say." Seeing that he was still acting tough, Xie Lian was in disbelief. "You're unbelievable. Are you still throwing the weight of your title around at a time like this?" The king was outraged. Get out of here." The queen and Feng immediately dragged Xie Lian out. "My son, don't be like that. He's your father and he's ill. Take a step back." On the run and ill. This was like adding frost to snow. Xie Lian buried his face in his hands. "Mother, why didn't you say something sooner? If you had, the illness wouldn't have escalated to coughing up blood. Do you know how hard that is to cure? Or rather, based on the current situation, it was impossible to cure." The queen was both dismayed and agreed. "Oh, we didn't know either that it'd worsen like this." Feng added, "Yeah, besides, we've been dodging Yang in pursuit the entire way. There was no time to stop." Xie Lian pulled his face from his hands. "I'll take him to a doctor in the city right now." "There's no need!" the king cried from within the room. Xie Lian looked back and was about to rebuke with, "I'm the one who makes the call right now," but Feng responded, "First, your highness. If you take his majesty to the doctors in the city, you'll be discovered for sure." Hearing this, Xie Lian instantly froze. "Oh, we have so much to talk about." The queen also spoke up. "That's what we were afraid of, which is why we didn't say anything the past few days. My son, why don't you just think of a way to bring back some medicine first?" In the back rooms, the king started coughing violently again, and the queen went in to look after him. Xie Lian was dazed for a good moment, and then he turned and went out. Feng called out, "Your Highness, what do you plan to do?" Xie Lian didn't answer, but started rummaging through all the shelves and chests in the cottage. "What are you looking for?" He didn't respond, but a brief moment later, he dug out something from the bottom of the chest. It was an ancient sacred sword. Feng looked and questioned, "What are you doing taking Hong Qing out?" "I'm going to pawn it." Feng was immediately shocked and he exclaimed, "You can't!" Xie Lian slammed the chest heavily. "I've already pawned off so many swords. This is just one more." Throughout their journey, in order to make up enough funds for carriages and bribes for crossing checkpoints, Xie Lian had already pawned off over half his collection of his beloved sacred swords. And since they couldn't go to large, bustling pawn shops, sometimes they'd even be blackmailed by shady merchants who discovered their identities and had to suffer bargain sales. Feng exclaimed, "It's not the same! Don't you really like this sword? Otherwise, why haven't you pawned it already? And instead stuffed it at the bottom of the chest? Besides, this was a sword the Emperor gifted you. So it won't sound good if this got out." Xie Lian said tiredly, "No matter how much I look at it or I like it, it's still not as important as a life. Let's go, let's go." The two made their way to the city with the sword, both looking downtrodden. When they came to the pawn shop, Xie Lian stopped in his step and looked at Hong Qing in his hand. Feng peered at him. "Why don't we forget about pawning it? Let's think of another way." Xie Lian shook his head. "It's too late. Besides, we don't know if there's any other way that we can make up enough money. If they went to steal, to rob, to trick, no mortal would be a match for them, and money would pour in much faster. However, it was precisely because they must uphold their moral compass and adhere to the ethical regulation of mortals, earn money honestly, that things were so difficult." Having made up his mind, Xie Lian said, "This has to be pawned. Once it's pawned, let's go buy medicine." While he said so, his feet still didn't move. Feng knew he was reluctant to go, that this was the last sacred sword Xie Lian had. He said, "Let's look around some more." Right then, on the other end of the street, came clamoring noise, shouting and yelling, and someone cried out, "Who's causing trouble? The audacity! Catch him! Catch him!" The two were both startled, and Xie Lian instantly backed up and sighed to alarm. "Who?" Feng was alarmed too, and they went over to check, returning after he was assured, "It's nothing, don't worry. It has nothing to do with us. It's not anyone looking for us, and it's not the young soldiers either." Only then did Xie Lian's tension relax. "What's going on?" "I'm not sure. It looks like a fight between some mad servants. You want to go see?" "Let's go see. Hopefully it's not some thug." The two shuffled over to watch. They saw in the center there was a couple of men who were brawling, and surrounding audience was cheering. Feng patted a passerby on the side who was enjoying the show. "Hey, buddy, what's going on here?" The passerby chutted, "Oh, don't you know? This is exciting. The servant is being the master." Such an affair. Xie Lian was speechless. "How come, and why is it a good thing?" "Of course it's a good thing," the passerby said. "The master's really no good. This servant followed him since he was young, very loyal, but him? He only knew how to take advantage. Not only to give him no pay, but he worked him to the bone. The servant couldn't take it anymore, so you see they're fighting." Sure enough, the one doing all the beating was cursing as he threw punches, yelling things like, "I've had it with you for a long time. Why don't you figure out for yourself what you've given me? My family's so poor we have nothing to eat, but you still ride over my head all high and mighty. From today onwards, I ain't your dog no more," and so on. The master, who was getting beaten, was hugging his head and screaming, while the crowd cheered. But their shouts were making Xie Lian's heart lurch in waves, giving him chills for some reason, and he glimpsed Feng face without thinking. Feng didn't notice his strange behavior at all, and when he heard of all the crummy deeds, he commented offhandedly, "I see. Then this master really is no good. No wonder the servant is rebelling." He didn't mean anything by it, but Xie Lian's heart cracked, and he gripped Hong Qing tighter. After much headache, Hong Qing was pawned, and the two finally had money. Oh my God, there's so much to talk about. They immediately went to inquire after a doctor and purchased over 10 kinds of medicine to take back. The medicine to cure symptoms of coughing blood was expensive, and the quantity needed was immense. It wasn't just 1 or 2 packets of medicine healed in a couple of days, and how things turned out afterwards must be closely observed. That evening, Feng unwrapped a few bundles of medicine and started stewing them outside the cottage, fanning wildly at the flames with a torn fan. As for Xie Lian, he once again was rummaging through the shelves and chests all over the house. After a while, he finally fumbled out a soft, shimmering golden belt. Originally, Xie Lian had a number of golden belts, but their end was the same as the sacred swords, all pawned off. There was only this one left, and Xie Lian had wanted to keep it as a souvenir at first, but now he decided to use it for something. Coincidentally, Feng looked up at him. "Your Highness, what are you doing holding that belt? You're not thinking of pawning it off, are you?" However, Xie Lian walked over and handed the golden belt to him. Seeing this, Feng's eyes bulged and he was bewildered. "What are you doing giving me this, Your Highness? When you shut the chest just now, you didn't shut your brain too, did you?" Only then did Xie Lian remember that in the upper court, To gift a golden belt had special meaning. Oh, and his face darkened. Oh, you think too much. I don't mean it that way at all. Oh, interesting. So, okay, again, we'll talk about this. You just take it. It's regular gold. And then he shoved it on him. Feng glared with that shimmering golden belt around his neck. No, you still gotta tell me, why are you stuffing me with gold? Just take it as compensation that I've owed you for so long, Xie Lian said. Feng was so confused. Oh my God, there's so much to read into this one scene. No, but what's with you all of a sudden? Why are you talking about compensation for me at a time like this? You might as well just pawn this off and buy more medicine for His Majesty. It's fine if you don't pawn it too. Keep it for yourself. This is something only heavenly officials can possess. That's the end of the chapter. Oh my God. Like, is he thinking about suicide because he's giving away all his things? Is he realizing how dire this situation is? Oh my God, like everything is all coming back up. It's all catching back up now, making all the sense. Hero defeated by a penny. 2. Hearing him mention medicine, Xie Lian looked back and turned his gaze towards the interior of the cottage where the king and queen were resting. A moment later, he said, I can think of other ways for the medicine, so just take this. Xie Lian was determined to give, and Feng couldn't understand why. He was both confused and felt kind of funny. He shrugged, picking up the ragged cattail leaf fan and continued to fan the flames to stew the medicine. Fine then, I'll keep it for you now. But whenever you want it back, just let me know. Xie Lian shook his head. I won't ask for it back. You can do with it as you will. After pawning Hong Jing, their pockets were a bit fuller, and they managed to have a few good meals. Since the queen's skills were so shocking, Xie Lian graciously asked his mother to look after father and absolutely not enter the kitchen, as he himself would take over and manage the cooking. Oh man! Although he didn't have much experience, even if he'd never had pig's feet, he'd seen pigs walk. What he made was still somewhat edible, so the party was saved from mouth and stomach troubles. Oh my gosh! That day after the fight with the king, Xie Lian was actually feeling regretful, and he didn't know how to apologize to his father, so he could only do his utmost in caring for him. A patient who coughed blood couldn't be chilled, so he added more blankets and small heaters for him. The Yong'an soldiers were coming down hard on catching all the escaped Shanla nobility, and soon this city was also heightened in security. They finally settled, but now they must leave again. Xie Lian had already lost count of how many cities he passed while on the run with his parents in tow. To be honest, what he'd seen on the road, everything was so much more peaceful than he imagined. The most tragic was only the royal capital of Shanla. Everywhere else didn't seem to be severely affected. After all, to regular civilians, the king, the crown prince, the royal capital, and the nobility, all were things that were extremely far away. The change of a king didn't seem to have made much difference, especially since the new king wasn't a tyrant, and once he ascended the throne, there weren't any particularly strict decrees. So other than the few having a new topic for after-dinner conversations, there weren't further laments. When the king was named Shi, I planted this plot of land, and now the king is named Long, and I still plant the same plot of land, Xie Lian heard people say. They weren't wrong. But the strange thing was, in regards to the rumored crown prince who went from invincible to losing every battle, everyone's attitudes towards it was amazingly unified, as if the moment they spoke of him, everyone would suddenly transform into a patriotic citizen of Shanla. He really couldn't understand nor accept it. However, he really didn't have much mind to worry over such things anymore. The money they made from pawning Hong Jing didn't last a few months before it was all depleted. An illness that made one cough up blood was already hard to cure, plus the king was frustrated and depressed. So there needed to be a great amount of medication to help him hang on in a passable state. If the medication should be cut off, the condition would no doubt worsen considerably. Xie Lian had nothing left on hand to pawn, and on this day, after having loitered the streets for a long time, he mulled and mulled before finally turning to Feng. Why don't we give it a try? Feng peered at him. Then let's give it a try. It wasn't the first time the two hesitantly thought to give it a try. It was just before now they hadn't made up their minds. Besides, there was once when they were conversing, the king overheard their intent and became outraged, throwing a huge fit. He was intransigent that Xie Lian do not such shameful things for money, otherwise he would refuse to drink his medicine, so in the end the two had to abandon the thought. Yet now they were in dire straits, there was no need to say it clearly, they both understood each other. Xie Lian nodded and wrapped the white silk bandage tighter around his face. Your Highness, you don't have to do this. Just me alone is enough. So even if the king asks, it'd be all right. Then he inhaled deeply, held his breath for a moment before suddenly roaring at the pedestrians on the street. Dear folks on the street, don't miss out on this! The pedestrians jumped in surprise and they all gathered around chattering. What's with the yelling? What are you guys up to? What have you got to show us? I want to see shattering boulders on the chest. Feng Xin removed the bow on his back and boldly pulled at it. My nickname is Godly Archer. I can shoot a bullseye from 100 feet away. I will show off my embarrassing skill for everyone to see. If you all enjoy the show, will you please grant me some coins? What godly archer, what embarrassing skills. Those were all words they learned from watching street performers. While they kept saying they would never busk, they had long since kept in mind how all the others had been doing it. The crowd grumbled. Oh, stop wasting your breath. Just get on with it. We've been waiting. Now hurry up. Feng Xin placed an arrow upon the bow and then pointed at an idle man in the crowd who was munching on fruits and said, will this uncle please step out, place this apple in your head, and I can shoot it without fault from 300 steps away. The idle man shrank his neck and withdrew into the crowd. I'm not doing it! Feng Xin exclaimed, I won't hit you, don't worry. If I shoot you by accident, I'll pay however much to recompensate. The idle man yelled back, I'm no fool. If you shoot me by accident, it won't matter how much you pay me back. Since you're out here to perform, don't you got an assistant or something? Shouldn't you be shooting the one next to you? Yeah! Xie Lian said too, let me. Someone from the crowd tossed over a fruit and Xie Lian caught it, ready to put it on his head. However, Feng Xin never had the intention of having Xie Lian get involved, so why would he allow this? And in his moment of panic, he grabbed the fruit and ate it himself. Then he changed the direction of the arrow, targeting a banner hanging high up from a tall building. He cried, I'll shoot that! Then he shot the arrow. He was extremely skilled in archery, so of course he shot the target, and the surrounding audience all cheered and laughed. Well, dang, you got it! You do got it! They all laughed and babbled, and there were actually some who tossed a few coins. Small, round little coins tumbled and rolled on the ground, and Feng Xin went to pick them up. Xie Lian also silently crouched down to pick them up, but his heart was feeling low, like he'd lost something. In the past, Feng Xin was the crown prince's servant, never mind the common peasants. Even normal ministers had to be courteous and polite whenever they saw him. Some even tried to get friendly. Before, when they hauled rocks and earth, just heating the hollering ringleaders was stifling. Now they had to endure being watched like monkeys. His skill of shooting 100 feet wasn't used to kill enemies in battle, but to entertain the masses. Just thinking of this made his stomach turn. Just then, a sharp voice of a woman came out. Who's shooting arrows in the streets? When Xie Lian heard, his heart dropped. Everyone in the crowd pointed at Feng Xin. It's him! Feng Xin was bewildered, and the crowd parted as several women came stomping over, holding an arrow. The one Feng Xin had shot earlier. The women surrounded him. Oh, you damn brat! Did you shoot this? What gut? Shooting weapons randomly in broad daylight? You destroyed our screen! Tell me, who's gonna pay for this? Yeah, you've scared away so many of our customers. It turns out the arrow Feng Xin shot earlier was so powerful, it flew all the way to someone else's yard. Feng Xin already didn't like talking to women. Oh, and these ladies all wore heavy makeup, their foundation layering their faces, smothering and suffocating. They probably came with ill intent and yelled to the point where he kept waving his hands, backing away. Xie Lian hastily came to shield in front of him. Oh, I'm sorry, he didn't mean to. As for compensation, we'll think of something. The women's tempers were flaring and they pushed and shoved. And who are you? Yet unexpectedly, with this push and pull, the white bandage covering Xie Lian's face slipped. And when those women saw his face, their eyes lit up, their tones taking a greasy turn. Oh, what a handsome little gay. Oh. One woman clapped, her eyes crescent and blossoming. Very well, it's decided. You're together, right? We'll take you as repayment then. Before his head he had even wrapped around this development, Xie Lian was dragged away by these women, all the way to a rather lavish little establishment. When he looked up, the higher levels were all women dressed like blossoming flowers, chirping like birds. Only then did Xie Lian realize he was taken away by a bunch of brothel mistresses. Instantly, goosebumps raised on his skin. Oh, wait, I don't have money. I really don't have money. Of course you've got no money. That's why we brought you here, to earn money. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm a man, Xie Lian exclaimed. The brothel mistress replied in annoyance. We know you're a man. We're not blind. Feng Xin, who was surrounded by the crowd, finally broke through a sea of people and darted over, shouting, Let go of him this instant! The two women were in a horrid state. The two were in a horrid state and bolted. Since they knew they were in the wrong, they didn't dare fight back. The enraged brothel mistresses called over some 30 fighters, chasing them all over the streets. They had never been involved in such a situation, and all in all, they would never dare approach that area again. But the two could confirm that busking was a viable way of earning money, so they changed location and set up shop. There were fresh faces, so the locals were all very interested. Plus, Feng was an honest, good man with a proper appearance, looking rather handsome. So in the first few days, they did manage to earn a small fortune that could help pay for food and medication to last for at least half a month. However, good things didn't last, and it didn't take half a month before someone came knocking. That day, after Xie Lian and Feng had packed up, several beefy men came to look for them. Xie Lian was greatly alarmed, scared. They were Yongin soldiers, his fists ready to strike under his sleeves. He demanded in a low voice, "Who are you?" The leading man humped, "You guys have been dallying on our turf for days. Don't you know who we are?" Xie Lian and Feng were both puzzled. Another man spoke up, "You stole so much of our business. Don't you think it's rude if you don't explain yourselves?" The two finally understood what was going on. It turns out those were the other local street performers. Every working man in the world belonged in guilds and gangs, drawing their own turf. When the two of them came, they all took all their customers away, so when the others couldn't take money, of course they'd come looking for trouble. The two of them weren't learned of the world, so how could they possibly know this etiquette? If it wasn't because we're at the end of our rope, who'd want to steal business like this? Xie Lian thought bitterly, but he spoke courteously. It's not really a matter of stealing, right? People will go watch what they want to watch, so it's not like we're forcing anyone to come watch our shooting performance. As if the other party would listen, they exclaimed rudely, "Not a matter of stealing! No one's made anything the past few days. You've taken all the grub!" Crack! The mob jumped in surprise and looked over and saw Feng drop his fist to the wall on the side. On the wall was a giant punch mark. Cracks crawling out all around. He said coldly, "Are you looking for trouble?" The mob of beefy men were certainly here to start trouble at first, to talk with their fists. But after Feng's punch, there was no doubt that his fist was more solid than theirs, and instantly their fires were extinguished by half. Still, they refused to let this go so easily, and the leading man changed his tune after having been stuck for a second. "Well, how about this? We'll do this by the rules. Let's compete with our skills. The winner gets to stay. The loser will pack up and leave, never to set up shop in this area again." Hearing it be a competition, Feng was even more glad. Of course he was glad. How could mortals possibly compete with them? It was a sure win. Xie Lian breathed a sigh of relief. "I agree to this. How do you want to do this?" "We'll use our best busking trick." I forget that Feng is actually, not mortal. He is still a heavenly official. While they spoke, the two other men had brought over a few long rectangular stone slates, or a deputy rather, and that men patted the stone slates, shattering boulders on the chest. "How about it? Do you dare?" Seeing how proud he looked, it seemed this was indeed his specialty. Xie Lian also squatted down and felt that slate and looked up. "Oh, this won't be a problem for me, but will this not be a problem for you?" The slate was the real deal. The man laughed. "Judging by the shape of you, you best worry yourself." Feng squatted next to him. "Your Highness, let me." "No, you've worked the past few days. Let me do this time." He should exert some effort too. Thus, Xie Lian and the man both lay down on the ground, a stone slate pressing down on both their chests. Feng received a large hammer, turned it in his grip, and was about to smash it down when Xie Lian suddenly spoke up. "Wait!" The others were delighted. "What, do you admit defeat? It's not too late to admit defeat now. We'll let you go." "No, I want to add another slate." Xie Lian said, "Are you crazy?" Xie Lian explained lazily, "Did everyone say so? This is a competition. If we both use one slate each, there'd be no difference in skill, so how could it be considered a competition?" The street performers all looked doubtful, and some even thought he went mad. Some thought he was bluffing, and after much discussion, they indeed added another stone slate to the top of his chest. Yet unexpectedly, Xie Lian wanted them to add another. Now everyone was sure he was losing it, and they added a third slate incredulously. Upon Xie Lian's chest were 3 stone slates weighing down heavily, looking rather terrifying. Under the concentrated watch of the crowd, Feng raised the large hammer, and without blinking, he smashed down, and those 3 stone slates cleanly cracked into multiple pieces. Amidst cheers, Xie Lian crawled up from the ground, uninjured and calm. Dusting his robes, and with ease, while everyone watched in awe, the leader's face was pale and dark. Xie Lian thought now he should back off, right? He had thought the other party would concede to his victory and never come to seek trouble again, yet unexpectedly, the man's expression changed, and suddenly he gritted his teeth. "Now add 2 more to me too. No, 3 more. "Oh, big bro, you can't. This man must know wicked spells. There's no need for you to go along with him." "Yeah, he must be faking it." Feng exclaimed angrily. What the F? You're the ones who lack skills, but you turn around and say we're using wicked spells and faking it? But the leader cried, the stones, slates, and hammer all belong to us. How would we not know if there's wicked spells? This brat does have some skill, but stacking 3 slates is nothing. I can stack 4. As long as we win, they have to leave. That's impossible. Give up. Don't lose your life over this. But the man was bullheaded, forcing the others to stack 4 stinkingly heavy stone slates on his body. You just watch. Xie Lian could tell things were going wrong and whispered, Feng, should we stop this? There's no way a mortal can take 4 slates. Let's watch first. He shouldn't be asking for deaths, just a couple smashes, and he should know to back off. Xie Lian frowned slightly and nodded and decided to watch and see. Sure enough, the little buddy holding the hammer only apprehensively knocked once, and the man's face changed. The one holding the hammer immediately stopped, not daring to move again. But the man yelled, Harder! Did you miss a meal? Why is your smash so pathetic? The little brother didn't dare to be sloppy, and the second time he used all his strength, and bang! After that loud sound, the face of that man exploded in red, like he was holding back a big mouthful of blood. Xie Lian and Feng both saw things were going in the wrong direction and quickly called out, Wait, don't force yourself! The man yelled, Who's forcing himself? This is my specialty. Watch and I'll make you thoroughly concede your defeat. With a distraught face, that little buddy smashed again, and now he'd done it. The man and spat a mouthful of blood all over the ground, scaring the little buddy who dropped the hammer. The mob all rushed up. Let it go, big bro. If those 2 bastards want to cling onto this place, then let them cling. Your life is more important. Veins popped on the man's forehead and blood foamed at his mouth. I won't let this go. It has been days since we all had a bite to eat, and if this doesn't keep up, isn't this asking for our livelihoods? Continue. I refuse to believe that I can't compete with this tender, delicate little brat. This is my specialty. Xie Lian couldn't watch anymore and spoke up first. Let it go. If this is the case, then I concede defeat. Starting tomorrow, we won't come anymore. Come on, Feng. He then turned to leave. Behind them, the mob cheered, and Feng followed up. Your Highness, we're going to give up this place just like that. They'd finally found a way to earn money, but now they had to abandon it. Xie Lian sighed. There's no other way. Those few rounds just now already caused great internal injuries to him. I'm afraid he's almost half handicapped. If we kept competing, someone would die. If that happens, we won't be able to stay either. He was really asking to die. We're all trying to make a living, Xie Lian said simply. Xie Lian was also feeling a little bad. Had he known, he wouldn't have asked to sack 3 slates, and he wouldn't have admitted defeat so early so that the man wouldn't force it. And he would have admitted defeat early so the man wouldn't force himself to take on 4 slates. Even if he was boorish and reckless, there were still parts of him that were respectable. Don't talk about it anymore. We don't absolutely have to busk here, putting all of our eggs in one basket. However, that night when they returned to their hiding place, the queen sorrowfully informed him the king's symptoms were worsening, and he might not be able to endure many more moving, that he needed to rest for a while, which means they couldn't leave the city for the time being. Xie Lian rummaged through the shelves and chests again, but he couldn't find anything to pawn. So he sat next to the chest, spacing out. Feng was stewing medicine, humming as he did so. He hummed and he hummed, sounding more and more off key, and while Xie Lian didn't pay attention at first, he couldn't ignore it after a while. What's with you, in a good mood? Feng looked up. Oh, no? Really? He had noticed in the past few days, after they started performing on the streets, that Feng was acting a bit strange. Sometimes he'd grin like a fool for no reason. Sometimes he'd suddenly turn troubled. When Mu Qing was around, Xie Lian and Feng rarely left each other's side. After Mu Qing left, sometimes Feng would have to go deliver food or run some other errands for the king and queen, and he'd be gone for a period of time in a day. Xie Lian felt he must have bumped into something, but he didn't have the energy to care. Eyeing the medicine pot in the front of Feng and silent for a while, Xie Lian questioned, Is this the last packet? Feng flipped through the bundles on the ground. It is. If we don't go tomorrow... He remembered the king was inside the cottage and couldn't overhear him, so Feng lowered his voice. If we don't go bust tomorrow, what will we do? After a long while, Xie Lian abruptly stood up. You stay in guard. I'll think of a way. Feng was confused. Where are you going? What way can you possibly think of? Xie Lian left without looking back. Don't mind me, and don't follow me. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh well Oh, buddy. Well, none of these got resolved in this chapter set, and wow, this may have been one of the most somber and sad chapter sets that I've read in this entire series so far. There was not much happy going on in this chapter set. So this discussion is going to be interesting because from the start of this chapter, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, but there's a lot loaded in the words of these chapters. There's a lot of things, and I'm kind of in awe because MXTX has framed these incidents in a certain light in the present timeline, right? Like when we were at Banyu, when we were in the desert, we were set up in that little shop, and we brought up Qing, and Feng brought it out, and Xie Lian's like, oh my god, you found the sword, you relocated it, and he's like, I did. At the time, you don't think much about it, you're like, oh, and he's like, oh, we pawned swords back in the day so we could buy food, and at the time, you just kind of laugh and go, oh, well, that must have been exciting and fun, just pawning swords and getting money and living life on the streets, all, being a rebel. And then you get to these chapters, and you see what was really going on, and it is the most heartbreaking thing in the world. And in the Golden Belt, Xie Lian discovers the Golden Belt, thinks it's connected to Xie Lian, and is like, oh, wow, it's the Golden Belt. Well, did Feng give it to her? Okay. And you're like, okay, well, when did he get the Golden Belt? And you find out that he gave him the last of his possessions. And there's a lot loaded with that scene. There's a lot loaded with these chapters, but those moments in the past when we just kind of laughed at him and we were like, oh my gosh, those are what crazy times, right? I wonder what Xie Lian's life was like on the streets. It's not fun. It's not good. And there's something, I think, because of the air of urgency and tension with his parents being with them, I think that's what adds that layer of dread. Right? Because when we went back to Banyu, and it was Banyu and Pei Su with Xie Lian, like on the streets, busking and getting, like, dancing in the streets for money, there was almost this, like, romantic Moulin Rouge-esque air to it, where it was like, oh, well, they're just there, la vie boheme, and, it was like living on the streets like a bunch of, hippies and stuff, and, like, it just seemed like there wasn't the stakes of it. Like, they had food, clearly. Xie Lian was a terrible cook, but they had food, and they didn't seem like they were suffering, right? They were just like, they were in poverty, obviously, and they were on the streets, but they weren't suffering. And then when you see him as a street performer with the Feng Guoxi arc, it's like, okay, he was a street performer. Obviously, he was back on the streets, didn't have any money. It seemed like he was still renovating and that. He wasn't quite to his scrap collector days yet, but he was getting there. But he didn't seem like he was suffering, right? Even though he was, I'm sure. It didn't seem like it to us, the audience. But here, you feel that suffering. You feel the hole that Mu Qing leaving has created, and the hierarchy and the ladder that suddenly collapsed. The fact that his father has too much pride and cannot let certain things go and has gotten to this point where he's really, really ill. And the fact that the mom is just trying to hold it all together and not have a mental breakdown herself. And the fact that they're running constantly from being found and executed on the run. And Xie Lian's not worried about himself because Xie Lian can't die. But his parents can die. And that's what's bothering him. And he's trying to do things the way he should. But, oh my God, there's so much with these chapters. And I wanted to cry. Like, I told y'all, this volume's going to make me cry. It's going to make me sob because I'm seeing, like we have this image in our head going through of like, oh, Xie Lian, he's really struggled. But man, MXTX, she's like, okay, I've told you he's struggled. Now we're going to go down in the trenches and you're going to see how bad it got. And it's like, oh my God. And we haven't even mentioned Bai Wusheng yet. Like we're nearly, I think with the next set of chapters, we'll be halfway through this volume. Since we've gone in the flashback, we've not even mentioned Bai Wusheng. Don't even know. But oh my God. It's just these chapters were heartbreaking, and the writing on the wall, everything adding up, all of the symbolism, all the references. We need to go through it. And talk about it. But my heart was like Xie Lian's, and it was breaking more and more as we were going through, and I was like, I just wanted to sink in my chair and go, I don't know if I want to read this. I don't know if I want to read anymore. It's getting pretty bad, right? So I'm gonna throw Huckleberry's toy while we talk. So yeah, nothing gets answered. We do get a mention of possibly Long Ying the adult. We do get a mention of possibly him. We're gonna bring that back up. Maybe he gets mentioned, but that's literally the only thing. Nothing else really gets resolved. It's just sad days of Xie Lian, days of our lives with Xie Lian, and none of them are good. And so we need to establish a couple things here right off the bat. I like the chapter title. The last of chapters were Penny for a Wandering Soul, in which Xie Lian gets money and he uses it to save people, right? So it's the idea of money. I like the concept here that in the last chapter, it was the idea of how it can save someone. And we see that in this chapter, where literally it's them getting the medicine for his father, it's them getting food, it's them getting things to survive, it's them paying for the lanterns to get the wandering souls. It's money to save someone, but it also can destroy someone. It can save and it can destroy. And this episode was called Hero Defeated by a Penny. And what that represents is the idea that Xie Lian is this great hero, but if you don't got any money, you can't do anything. Like, he's just down and out. And it's so cruel when you think about it now. It's almost like it is the cruelest thing, right? Because you have Xie Lian, right? Put him over here. We're going to make a little thing for Xie Lian right here. But you have Xie Lian, who not only has to suffer knowing that he was a major part of Shanla's downfall, not only does he have to deal with that, not only does he have to deal with the fact that he ignored the Goshi, his warnings, and other people's warnings. It was like, oh no, I got this, I can do this, it'll be fine. And then it wasn't. Not only that, but he's also dealing with the fact that his parents are not well. His mom is like, her hands are bleeding from doing her own laundry, and she's tired, and she looks like she's about to have a mental breakdown, and she's doing everything in her power to not have that mental breakdown. And then his dad is literally falling apart at the seams and has an illness that's gotten to the point where it probably isn't curable. They're just masking the symptoms at this point. The writing is on the wall that Xie Lian, I'm sure, is seeing that they're not gonna make it. By the end of this set of chapters, it's like his dad's on his last leg and isn't even his dad anymore. And his mom, like, what is she gonna do? How is that gonna go down? So there's all that. His parents aren't well. The dad at least is not going to make it. And Xie Lian has to deal with that and the fact that he has no money, and he's having to busk for it, which is like an embarrassment to his father, because his father's like, you're a crown prince, you're royalty, you're not a street performer. And Xie Lian's like, I have no choice. So it's really kind of cruel when you think about it, that Xie Lian, him getting exiled isn't just, oh, you don't get to come and hang out with the cool kids in the heavenly realm. No, he's impoverished. His family's dying in front of him. One of his best friends has left him. The other one is not far behind. And it's Xie Lian's mental state is absolutely deteriorating because he can't handle it. It's just like he has been built up his entire life. He was praised as this, and I'm going to use the word prodigy in a sense that he was praised as, oh, you're going to be great. You're going to be great. You're a swords master. You're going to be a heavenly official. It's going to happen. You're going to have everything at your fingertips. And the fact that he had all these sacred swords that he ends up having to pawn off, that he had to pawn for money. And then the last belt, we'll talk about that last belt that was gold. But yeah, the swords pawning off. He's praised as a prodigy, but then he has no preparation for survival after the fall. Yeah, and that's like, Xie Lian's very depressed. It's very clear. The fact that he's had to, like, we know how much he geeks out about swords, how much he loves them. So it makes sense that he's really, really depressed right now. It also makes sense now why Hua Chong was like creating the armory at Paradise Manor. He was like, when my Gege gets here, I'm going to give him back all the things that he lost. I'm going to give him back all the swords. I'm going to give him back everything and make him feel better. And I'm like that, knowing that he had that armory there to possibly make Xie Lian feel better after he had to pawn all of his swords away just to get money to survive. And the thing that sucks so much about it is that those swords were gifts. They were things that had value to him, and they were things that, you know, you kept and they stayed relevant. Money is gone like that. It's gone. It's fleeting. It's here. It's gone. There is no, like, a dollar bill has no sentimental value. It's something you use, you get rid of it, and then it's gone, and it becomes something else that you can use for yourself. But it's not anything that holds any type of sentiment. And so it says something. I feel like MXTX makes a very bold and true claim about poverty and the idea of the mental effect that it has on you. You have nothing of stability or sentimentality on you because you're constantly just getting rid of things just to be able to keep existing. And that's horrifying because you have nothing. You're just like, you have nothing to hold on to that gives you meaning or gives you happiness. Like Xie Lian, like the image of him rummaging around the cupboards looking for something to make money is heartbreaking. And so it really is like Xie Lian's fall from grace. Xie Lian, you know, thought that he could handle it. He's like, oh, I'll be fine. What would it be like? And then we see what it's like, and it's like, no, it is not fine. Not at all. So, oh my God. So yeah, so he gets down. So, and the fact of the matter too is the fact they're being chased. I think if they weren't being pursued, it would not have been as bad as it was. But Yongin is pursuing any nobility, which is Xie Lian and his family. I feel like if Yongin wasn't pursuing them, if there wasn't an active search for the Shanla family going on right now, then I don't think it would be as bad as it could have. I don't think it would have gotten as bad as it did. Because I think Xie Lian and the king and queen could have just moved to another city, set up shop, and just lived there and not have had the stress and anxiety of not getting caught. I think it could have worked out much better. And that's just not happening, right? It's just not happening. And they note that everything is kind of like this rinse and repeat cycle where they keep going city to city, but nothing's changing. It's just like, ugh. And so Xie Lian and Feng are trying to like make money. They're trying to do the labor like they were to keep things going. And it's just not panning out for them well at all. And the thing about it is that Mu Qing is gone. And the thing about it is, I have dogged Mu Qing quite a bit in this story. I really have. I think someone noted with part 56, I think it was, the 5-chapter ones I don't like working, it was like Mu Qing's a bitch. I'm very torn with Mu Qing for a lot of reasons. But I want to note about this, that we need to talk about what Mu Qing, his duties were. His duties as the personal attendant. What those were, because he did a freaking lot. He did a freaking lot, right? So for example, Mu Qing kept the money pouch. He kept the money pouch. That's not something that's easy to do. Not everyone is responsible with money. I know some people that they don't need to have a checkbook. They don't need to have a money pouch. They need to give that to somebody else to manage their finances. They are not good with money. Feng acknowledges that he is not good with money. So that's why he didn't want to keep it. He's like, I can't be responsible for this. I don't want to do. I might lose it by accident. And Xie Lian's like, oh my God. So Xie Lian is the one keeping it on his person. But the problem with that, so the money pouch goes to Xie Lian. The problem with that is that Xie Lian, who's already in this depressed state, is now constantly reminded of the anxiety that they have no money. So something that Xie Lian didn't have to worry about before, that kind of alleviated some of that anxiety and gave him a little bit of relief, now he has it right there in front of him. But we'll talk about Mu Qing in that state here in a second, but I want to get through everything that he did. So also Mu Qing took food and supplies to the king and queen. He took all those to them. And now Xie Lian and Feng have to do it on top of the work that they're already doing. And then now the queen doesn't complain about this because she's like, oh, I get to see my son more. That'll be great. But Mu Qing was doing all that for them. I do love when they go to sit down with her. I love the idea of they think there's a dead chicken in the soup and they're like, what is that? And Function's like, that's no chicken. And they're like, well, then what is it? And if you've ever, the stew paste, if you've ever cooked with stew paste before, it does look like a block or like stuff that you're supposed to mix it in with the soup and it mixes in and it's not, it's supposed to become broth, become part of the soup. But it clearly has coagulated into this monstrosity and now they're like, well, no. And so they don't want to eat it. But then they realize what all she's been doing since Mu Qing isn't there. She asks where Mu Qing is, and Xie Lian, his heart squeezes, and he's like, oh, well, he's on a big mission, and I don't know when he's going to be back. And I don't know if the queen knew he was lying. A part of me thinks that she knew he was lying or that he wasn't coming back, or maybe she sees the writing on the wall. But the other part of it is that she has been relying on Mu Qing for going and getting stuff, and now that he's gone and she's having to do everything by herself, she's like, ugh, oh, so he's not coming back anytime soon. Okay. And so her delicate, exquisitely maintained, wealthy hands were horrifying, scraped and peeling, and there's traces of blood. Xie Lian's like, what is going on? What's happened to you? And so Mu Qing did taking care of the king, the queen, Xie Lian. And so he also did the washing. He did the washing and the folding of clothes. He did all of that. And so he helped maintain them. And now it has to go to Xie Lian and Feng Shen, who are still trying to also, on top of everything, make money for the group. So it's very much like, one, it's like a job that you have. Like if your company downsizes and somebody that was in charge of all these tasks suddenly quits, then they're like, well, these tasks still need to happen. So now we're going to relegate it to you and you and you. But then you're like, but I'm already doing all these things. And they're like, well, sorry, now you're doing these extra things too. And you're like, And the problem is sometimes you find another person to come in and take those tasks on again. Sometimes you don't, and it just becomes part of your job, and it's just added stress. And that seems to be what's happening here, which is a nice little workplace kind of crossover and reference. But what I was wanting to bring about is the fact that Mu Qing was doing a lot. Mu Qing was handling the money. He was handling food and supplies to the king and queen. He was helping them get things. He was doing all the laundry. He was washing the clothes. And he'd been doing stuff like that since Xie Lian was in Shanla as the prince. He'd been doing this stuff for years, only now they're on the run and he was doing the king and queen as well as Xie Lian stuff. There is a part of me that understands now, seeing the extent of what Mu Qing was doing, that knows why he left. That Mu Qing was like, oh, things are about to get harder on top of what I'm already doing, and we're showing no sign of it changing. It's just getting worse. I need to go because this isn't going to be good. I see now why Mu Qing ducked out when he did. It makes sense why he would want to leave. That he's just like, I can't take it anymore. And I do feel bad for everything that he was doing. It was a lot. And I could see why you'd snap. The thing that sucks about it, though, is that he did snap. And he did leave. And I think that Mu Qing in the present... Mu Qing's a tsundere. So I feel like he does feel bad about it. He feels bad that he left. And he did kind of leave Xie Lian high and dry. Feng Shen's going to be the same way. They leave Xie Lian high and dry. But at the time, you kind of get why he did it. Only it's now in the present, like years later. And I think the thing that doesn't help the fact is that Xie Lian is so forgiving. Xie Lian doesn't, he doesn't hold a grudge against Mu Qing or Feng Shen for leaving him. He's like, no, you guys had your own lives and my life was the one falling apart. I shouldn't expect you to stay because of me. You guys had your own stuff going on. So yeah, it's kind of one of those situations where I think Xie Lian, the fact that he's so forgiving, it only makes them feel worse. And they're like, But I get why Mu Qing left now. I do. It still sucks. And I'm not happy about it, but I get it. And so now everybody's always having to like cook, wash, clean, do that. And then yes, the fact that Mu Qing was cooking. He also was the fact that since he left, she started cooking as well. Her cooking must be absolutely horrifying, because the fact that they say Xie Lian cooked and it was edible, I was like, wait, if Xie Lian's food is edible in comparison to the queen's, that is saying something, right? And then God, there is so much relatability in the way MXTX writes in these chapters, because I think that any of us at any given time can compare to something from this chapter and relate to it. Whether you've been in an impoverished situation where you had to worry about like food security and things like that, or whether you were in a situation where a family member was ill and not telling you until it was really bad, and you're like, why didn't you say anything? And then like that situation, because yeah, she's like, just not any kind of crazy medicine or anything, just, like if you're coughing up blood or something. I'm like, wait, what? And Xie Lian losing it at this point. It is the most empathetic and down to earth and raw that we have seen Xie Lian, is him at this moment being like, no, what is going on? Because Xie Lian's like, we've been doing all of this to keep you safe, and now you tell me that you've been sick this whole time and didn't think to tell us, and it's possible it's irreversible, and all of the stuff we've been doing is for no reason. So the king, put him here, the king is very ill. But yeah, Xie Lian drops all pretense. Like, Xie Lian's been our little innocent cinnamon bun that's been like, everything's all right, everybody. That drops in this chapter, and it was palpable. The way that he was just like, no, what is wrong? Why is this happening? And the king is too proud, right? It's so interesting. Too proud to beg. What's so interesting is that Xie Lian gets a lot from his parents. He kind of gets his mom's, like, puts on the facade, like, everything's fine, it's okay, here's my cooking. Like, oh, he gets that kind of kindness, and just, he gets the kindness from her, but also the way that she is very much, like, restrained and doesn't, like, draw attention to herself, right? That's kind of like Xie Lian. But Xie Lian gets from his father the idea of, oh, I'm fine. No, nothing's wrong. Don't worry about me. He gets that from his dad. Because how many times has Xie Lian been like, oh, don't worry, I've just been impaled. I'm okay. I'm not going to die. It's fine. That's exactly what his dad is doing. His dad is doing the same thing. His dad's like, oh, don't worry about me coughing up blood. It's none of your business. Like, Xie Lian gets that exact same mentality from his father. And it's why, what I love that what MXTX does here is portray a very realistic dynamic between a parent and a child, where the parent doesn't understand how to communicate with their parent. Like, in Modao Zushi, I mean, the queen, Wei Wuxian's, mother, was his not his biological mother, but his adopted mom. She was hard to deal with, but she still communicated with Wei Wuxian. She still communicated with him. And his dad, Wei Wuxian, had a great relationship. And so his biological parents, when they were around, they had a great relationship with him. But in this case, I really like that MXTX shows just how difficult it can be to communicate with a parent. And when you and your parent are so similar, but just different enough that it hinders that communication, and you get kind of antagonistic towards one another. It's so beautifully portrayed here, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. Because Xie Lian cares about his dad. He does. In book 2, it kind of was like, oh, Xie Lian doesn't care a lot about his dad. His dad's kind of passive with him, and then they have this like passive-aggressive relationship. But in this moment, Xie Lian does care about his dad an awful lot. And he's mad at him because he loves him so much, and he's not helping himself because he's too proud. And it kind of is like, well, that's how Huachong feels about you when you like hurt yourself and say, oh, it'll be fine. That's exactly the same thing. So it's really sad. And the description of his father in this bed of ragged blankets, like all they had, and that he just has this like sunken in eyes. He's ashen, and he just looks like an old man. Like, my heart, like, I wanted to cry. My heart was breaking. Because Xie Lian realizes at that moment, he's been away just trying to make money for them for so long that when he opens up the door and it smells, that phrase, the suffocating, musty air of sickness, you can smell that. And I've smelled that before. You can smell it. And oh my God, it broke my heart. Because Xie Lian's like, you've been sick for a while and you just haven't told anybody. Oh, and it's like everything is crashing down around him, and I'm gonna cry. These chapters were not fun. Straight up not having a good time, bro. No, sorry, Bob, no. These chapters were heartbreaking. And so then, so they kick Xie Lian out because, and I like that Feng Shen like holds him back. He's like, hey, dude, we're gonna, like, at one point, Xie Lian is about to say, like, Xie Lian is about to rebuke. He's like, they're like, Xie Lian's like, I'm gonna take you to a doctor right now. And the king's like, no, you're not. And then Xie Lian was about to say, I'm the one who makes the call right now. And Feng Shen's like, we can't take him to the doctor or you'll be discovered. Like, cool your jets. But it's just the idea that Xie Lian, he is not in control anymore of anything. And it's making him spiral. Because that's the thing. Xie Lian has grown up throughout, the Shanla years. He was in control of a lot of things. He was in control of his destiny. He was in control of, like, I'm going to go on a journey. I'm going to cultivate. I don't have to become the king of Shanla. I'm going to go do my own thing. I don't have to take care of Qirong because it's my decision. And I can go do whatever I want. And then when he becomes the heavenly official and chooses to do things for Shanla, he's like, no, I'm going to go get the Rain Master's hat. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And you guys just have to either disagree with me or just let me do it. This is the point where Xie Lian doesn't have control anymore. He doesn't have the powers of a heavenly official. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have the ability to go where he pleases freely because he has to disguise himself. He can't just walk up and talk to people because it might reveal that he's the crown prince and ruin everything. He can't control his friend leaving because he's just he's got like compassion fatigue. That's something we had an in-service the other day for work, and we had a term, we had like a health and wellness seminar, and the health and wellness one was talking about compassion fatigue. I'm going to write that on here actually, because I think it applies in these chapters and in the last. It's called compassion fatigue. And what it is if you are somebody that's empathetic or someone that is helping others, eventually you just run out of steam. It's like burnout. It's like eventually you just have compassion fatigue where you've cared and cared and cared and cared and cared and you can't care anymore. And you're just like, and I don't think Xie Lian necessarily is experiencing it, but I think Mu Qing did. I think Mu Qing was like, nope, done. Can't do it anymore. Can't care anymore. I need to have a mental health day and move on. But it's just this idea that Xie Lian is so wore out and he's spiraling without control of his own life that he's grasping at any straws to maintain it. And that's when Feng Shen's like, whoa, we gotta think. You're spiraling, we gotta think. And Xie Lian's like, okay. And that's when he goes and gets Hong Jing and is like, we're gonna pawn it for medicine money. And Xie Lian's like, what else can we do? And I felt so bad because Feng Shen was like, Xie Lian, this is your favorite sword. It's clearly one you enjoy and you love because it was from the emperor and you've held on to it. Like, you saved this one for last. And Xie Lian's like, I know, but I'm not going to let my dad die because I like a sword. And that, it crushed me too, because it's like, even despite everything, Xie Lian is still selfless and that he's trying to save someone else. And I think that's why Hua Chong gets so mad sometimes, because Xie Lian, he does not think of himself. He's been constantly trying to save others since the start of this story. And it's so sad because he's like, well, I don't need this, but my dad needs the medicine, so let's just do this for him. And I feel like Hua Chong, that's another thing why Hua Chong in the present tries to give Xie Lian everything. He's like, he doesn't want Xie Lian to want for anything. He's like, your whole life you have suffered primarily giving to others and leaving nothing for yourself. And Hua Chong's like, I want you to have everything. He's like, opulence, you own everything now. And Xie Lian just, like, the idea that he would give up something he loved because he's like, no, a life is worth more than that. So they end up pawning the sword, and getting the money to buy the medicine. But in the process, there's this brawl that breaks out where they talk about, like, something like, they're like, catch him and all this. And then they're like, the servant is beating the master, and the audience is cheering. Like, the crowd is cheering the servant beating the master. So we have the idea of the servant over the master. And so they go to the crowd, and Xie Lian's like, well, is this a good thing that he's beating him? And they're like, of course it is. The master is no good. And so it says the master was no good The servant was loyal for a long time since they were young, and he only knew how to take advantage. Not only did he give him no pay, but he worked him to the bone. And the servant couldn't take anymore, and the servant broke and got mad because he got nothing from the master. And sure enough, the one throwing punches and everything said, I've had it with you for a long time. Figure out yourself what you've given me. My family's so poor we have nothing to eat, but you ride over all high and mighty. I'm not your dog anymore. And everybody just cheering it on, right? And Xie Lian's heart just lurching, giving him chills. He's like, no. And the part that breaks Xie Lian's heart is when Feng Shen's like, well, no wonder the servant's rebelling. The master wasn't any good. And Xie Lian's heart cracking. Because I think there's a lot with that scene, right? It's not just the fact that Xie Lian, who is for helping everyone, is suddenly being like, why are we all complacent with this guy getting beaten? Like, regardless of whether he was good or not in their eyes, like, that's no reason to just sit here and cheer for this violence happening. I feel like that's one thing. The other thing is that the idea of, am I a good person or not? I'm sure Xie Lian feels like he's in the master's shoes. He's like, I've had Feng Shen and Mu Qing follow me for so long, and I really haven't paid them back. I haven't done anything for him. He's like, they followed me for years, and I've done nothing for them. He's like, I've given them nothing in return. If you think about it, Mu Qing was like convicted of, he was, threatened by people saying he was a thief and stealing from Xie Lian, and he actually hadn't. So Xie Lian, I think in that moment, is like, crap, I'm the master in this scenario. I've not only not treated Feng Shen and Mu Qing like with any compensation, really, except my company, but you could also say that it's relating to how he feels that the kingdom of Shanla is with him and his father. Like, people followed them and expected them to give back, and they weren't able to deliver. So I feel that Xie Lian, his heart breaks because people, it's so easy to see, like, Xie Lian's been in the position of the master and the one on top, and now he's like fallen so far, but it's seeing like how the people view, people are all about, someone that's high in power falling from grace, and Xie Lian's like, well, but then what? So it's kind of heartbreaking, right? And he says, after much headache, he pawned Hong Shen, and they finally had money. And got 10 different kinds of medicines to take back. Like, at that point, Xie Lian's like, yeah, no, it's not worth holding on to it. And I think that's partially one of the reasons why he gave Feng Shen the belt. Was in that moment, he's like, I've never given my subordinates anything except my lovely company and nothing else. And so I think the incident made Xie Lian realize that he's like, I need to give Feng Shen something as thanks. The funny thing about it is that when he gives him the belt, Feng Shen's like, oh, are you going to pawn that? And he's like, no, it's to you. And then Feng Shen's like, well, did your brain stop functioning? And only then does Xie Lian realize that the golden belt, that when you give it to somebody, it has another meaning. And I like that Xie Lian's like, I'm not into you. I love at that moment, Xie Lian's like, no, I'm not into you, Feng Shen. Come on now. But I like that for a second, Feng Shen was like, are you interested in me? And Xie Lian's like, God, no. I love it. I love that Xie Lian's not bothered by it, but it's just like, Feng Shen, no way. But he's like, no, I just want to give it to you. At first reading it, I thought it was a sign. That, like, if people have thoughts of suicide, sometimes one of the key red flags is that they start giving away their possessions when they're thinking about it, that they're giving stuff away because they're not going to keep it. And so when he gave him the belt at first, I was like, is this a sign that Xie Lian's just so broken inside that he's considering it, right? That he sees the writing on the wall, that his dad's not going to make it. But then in hindsight, I don't think that he was having an ideation in that moment, because he obviously wants to still be there for his parents. And even if his father dies, his mother's still there. So I don't think that was the case. I think it was twofold. One is that Xie Lian realized in that moment, he's like, I've not given my subordinates anything. And Mu Qing left because maybe I didn't give him enough. And he just didn't see the need. He didn't feel like he was being well compensated, so he just left. And Xie Lian's like, I can't have Feng Shen leave. If Feng Shen leaves, I'm screwed. And that's what's so heartbreaking about this, is because the end of this chapter, the writing is on the wall that Feng Shen is going to leave. We know he leaves. and it's because of Xie Lian. And she is referenced at the end of this chapter. She's not said by name, but it's referenced. And it's like, oh, it's coming. And Xie Lian being like, I want to give him the belt so he won't leave me. And the idea that Xie Lian thinks that he has to buy his friendship, he's like, it breaks my heart too. It makes me want to cry. He's like, I don't want Feng to leave me, so here's this golden belt. Don't go. Don't leave me. I need you real bad. And so then Feng at the end of the chapter says, it's fine if you don't pawn it too. Keep it for yourself. This is something only heavenly officials can possess. So one, he's giving it to Feng, but two, is it a sign that Xie Lian doesn't think he'll be a heavenly official anymore? So he's just going to give it back? Is he thinking, I'm not going to be a heavenly official anymore, so you take it? I don't know, but it's just, I want to do like the Snoopy thing at the end of this chapter. And we still have one chapter to go, right? So they go to the interior of the cottage and they're like, we need to go get medicine. And the king apparently was like all against them busking. He was like, absolutely not. And Xie Lian's like, we don't have a choice. Which it's sad that they finally go back to what Mu Qing suggested they do to begin with. And because Mu Qing is pretty savvy, he probably knew it was going to make money, but they were just like, oh, no. And now they're like, well, we don't have a choice. When beggars can't be choosers, right? And so they had a few good meals for about a month. It lasted a couple months. And then after the fight with the king, I like that Xie Lian talks about feeling regretful, but he doesn't know how to apologize to his dad, so he could only do it through caring for him, which is like something in himself, right? So Xie Lian doesn't know how to communicate with his dad. He's kind of estranged from him at this point. He doesn't know how to talk to him, but the only thing he can think to do is, well, I want to show my dad I still care, so I'm going to keep like bringing him blankets and getting heaters for him and treating him well. I just can't talk to him about it because it's awkward and I don't know what to do. And it's so damn sad. And so the youngin soldiers, this is another part that I was like, MXTX. So they pass all these cities on the run, but everything was more peaceful than he imagined. The only tragic place was the capital of Shanla. Everywhere else didn't seem to be too severely affected. So that's the other thing too, is the idea that Shanla, the capital, is really the only place in turmoil. Right? Really the only place in turmoil. And so he says there that to regular citizens, the crown prince and all them, they were all far away. There's that distance. Talk about that in just a second. But they were all far away. The change of the king didn't make much difference. He wasn't a tyrant, and so he didn't have any strict decrees. Other than a few after-dinner topics, there wasn't any further laments. The king was named Xi when I planted this land, and now the king is named Long, and I still plant the same plot of land. Meaning that it's same old, same old. The story keeps going, doesn't matter. The thing that's heartbreaking is it matters to Xie Lian and his family. Their whole livelihoods are destroyed by this, but nobody else seems to be that affected. What it reminded me of, and again, this is heartbreaking, is like when you are, I'm here in the U.S. and I hear about conflict and war and things like that, but because it's far away, and I'm going to get so emotional, but because it's far away, you don't feel connected to it. And so it's hard, right? It's hard to feel that connection because it's not near you, so you don't understand it so much. It's like that not only with war, but it's like that with any conflict. Like, unless the conflict is at your door, you often feel like that distance. You're like, oh, I don't have to worry about it. It's not me. It's fine. And I think Xie Lian, his heart gets broken because he's like, nobody cared. Other than the young soldiers trying to find them, nobody cares what's happened to them. They're not lamenting the loss of Shanla. They're just like, oh, well, the new guy seems okay. We're fine. We're still just going to keep on doing what we've been doing every day. Meanwhile, Xie Lian's entire world has been thrown upside down and completely changed. And his entire worldview and everything is spiraling into this despair, but no one around him seems to care. And how horrifying is that? Just, It's just these chapters. They are not fun. Not at all. They weren't wrong. But one thing that is unified is that they all hate Xie Lian. They all blame Xie Lian. The feelings for Xie Lian. Everyone's attitude towards Xie Lian is mutual. And that's like the sour cherry on top of the mud cake. Is the idea that Xie Lian, like nobody seems to care about him or his family's plight, but they all hate Xie Lian because he's the god of misfortune. That'd be enough to break anybody. Like how Xie Lian hasn't broken at this point, which we'll talk about that at the end of the chapter, how he hasn't broken at this point is amazing to me that Xie Lian's held on this long. Like we don't know exactly how long it's been. It's been at least half a year to a year since Shanla fell. It's been at least, we know that like 3 or 4 months pass between them getting the medicine to the end of the chapter, which is nearly half a year. And I'm assuming they'd at least been on the run for half a year more. So it's at least been a year. But Xie Lian's held on. But it's been hard. And again, he's not used to doing things on his own. So when we see Xie Lian in the present, he's had 800 years to fail and nearly die over and over again, but not die. And that's why he's like he is today, because of all the times he's fell. But this is the first time. So, of course, he's just mentally broken inside, right? And so they go to busk on the streets. And then the thing about it is, why Feng couldn't have shot the apple off Xie Lian's head? That would have solved a lot of these problems, because Xie Lian's like, oh, just shoot the arrow at me. Again, that is a problem because it's self-harm. Xie Lian is totally fine with having harm inflicted upon him, which is not good, not healthy. And Feng is like, I don't want to shoot you. We didn't agree to this. So that makes sense, right? It makes sense why Feng would be hesitant. So he ends up thinking, oh, well, I'll just shoot this sign up here, no harm, no foul. But that's not how the world works. Everything has like a causality. Everything has like a connection to something. And the thing that he shoots happens to be the sign for a business. And the sign for the business ends up getting mad. And it's a brothel. And they all come after Xie Lian. And the insane thing is, when I saw the women at the brothel, all I could think about was Modao Zushi and Wei Wuxian in the brothel with all the ghost girls. Like, that's all I could think about. This was not one of those moments. And Xie Lian is like, I don't want to go to a brothel. I was really worried for a second they were going to make Xie Lian sell his body, but Xie Lian is pure. He's never had anything like that happen, so no. No, that's not the case. But it was really, really sad. I was like, it's like I think he would have gone along with it too if it meant he could get money. I hope it doesn't get to that. I don't think it does, because Xie Lian's like pretty pure, and I don't think anything like that has happened to him in the story. So, and plus Gege would be like, absolutely not. So, but they managed to get away. But it felt very like Land of the Tender-esque. It felt very much like them all swarming him, trying to tempt him, and he was like, absolutely not. So then they go to another part of the street, and it actually works out really good. They make some money, it's fine, but then lo and behold, we find out that there's some guys that thought that this street corner was their territory, and are like, what are you doing here? And they demand them to leave because it's their turf. And again, that is this entire scene with the busking is going back to the third path and the 2 cups. That's what this whole scene's going back to. Because Xie Lian, he was trying to think, oh, well, there's a third path. If we can't busk here, we'll just go somewhere else, right? It's not either we do or we don't. We just move over here and it'll be fine. And then they get over here, and you have one group that's like, we need all the money to keep afloat and keep ourselves alive. And Xie Lian's like, well, we need the money too. And the answer of the extra cup doesn't exist. Doesn't work. You can't do that. Xie Lian finds out the hard way in this moment, and Mu Qing told him it wasn't going to work. But he was like, oh, if we have the 1 cup to split between the 2 of us, it's not enough for us to live. And if only one of us can have the cup, that means the other person's going to get hurt. So you need to get rid of a party have a party, leave, or you both die. And that's what the Gauche and Eldon were trying to tell Xie Lian. And Xie Lian was like, no, that's not the case. And now he sees firsthand, no, that is the case. God, I can't believe they brought that back just for here to be a real life example. That's insanity. It's insane. And then they do the slate slamming thing where Xie Lian gets a slate. And again, Xie Lian is hurting himself, but he doesn't care because he's like doing all this self-harm. Hua Chang would not have let this happen. Absolutely not. He would not have been about it. Nope. Would not have done it. Would not have been a thing. But, And he's like, and Xie Lian thought that if he just kept pressing, the guy would back off. And the guy doesn't. He doesn't back off. Instead, he's just as desperate as Xie Lian is. Xie Lian was so desperate. He's like, I'll just keep hurting myself because I can handle it. And the guy will back off and he'll fall for the bluff. And then the guy was like, I can't back off. We need the money to live. Like, the state that people are in with Xie Lian is they're willing to die to survive because those are the only options they have on the table. And Xie Lian's just like, I can't do it. We just have to leave. He's like, if this guy doesn't back down, somebody's gonna die, and I don't want to be responsible for it. And Xie Lian's like, we're all trying to make a living. Like, all of these things that were brought up as lessons that the Gauche was trying to warn Xie Lian about back in volumes 2 and 3, they're getting brought back up here, and he's learning the lesson, and it's not fun. And so the thing about it is that they finally go back to, they realize they're gonna have to busk somewhere else, but he's like, if we have to busk here, we don't have to do it. We can just, go somewhere else. But the queen informs him the king's symptoms are worsening. He can't move in this state. He needs to rest, so they can't leave. So it's like, okay, well, where are you gonna busk then? What were they gonna do? They've got to figure out a strategy. And Xie Lian is trying to find things to pawn, but everything's gone. So he's spacing out. Now, here's the thing. Do I think that Xie Lian is going to ask Feng Xin for the golden belt at some point? I think he is. I think Xie Lian was like, oh, I'll never ask for it back again. No, you keep it. I think Xie Lian's going to get so desperate that he's going to ask for it back. And I think that that's when Feng Xin's going to be like, I gave it away. Or Feng Xin's not going to be able to tell him, right? Because we know Feng Xin gives the golden belt to Xie Lian, the woman he loves. We know that's the case. But he's not going to be able to tell Xie Lian that because he doesn't want Xie Lian to know. So he's probably going to deny it or be like, oh, I lost it or something like that. And Xie Lian's going to get mad because he's going to be like, what do you mean you lost it? What do you mean you don't have it? We need it to survive. And we know Feng Xin is going to leave him after that. Because he's probably going to be like, I need to go with my lady friend and take care of her. I'm sorry. And the thing about it is that it's all tying back to this idea of self-care, of care, of family, and your own self-worth, right? Because, and what's tragic about it is I get why Mu Qing left now. I get it. I get that his mental state was like, nope, can't do this. And Feng Xin has fallen in love. And the whole thing where he was like humming for a while and it was sounding more and more off key sounds like the Little Mermaid when Ariel gets down. She's like, na 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 na, like thinking of Prince Eric, and the sisters are like, she's in love. Like that's instantly what I thought. I was Ariel coming down and like running the fork through her hair. That's Feng Xin thinking of Xie Lian. And you can't blame him because it's like, Feng Xin and Mu Qing devoted everything to Xie Lian, and Xie Lian's realizing in this chapter set that he gave nothing back. He's like, I was their friend, but I didn't really compensate them for everything they did for me, and I didn't really even try to get to know them. Well, they followed me because they knew everything about Xie Lian that Xie Lian would tell them. But Xie Lian didn't understand Mu Qing, didn't know his backstory as well. I mean, we learn a little bit about it in the second volume, but he didn't know a lot about him. We know nothing about Feng Xin. We know about his personality. We know about how he feels about Xie Lian and Mu Qing, but we don't know anything about him personally, like what's his likes, dislikes. I mean, we know he's afraid of women, but Xie Lian didn't know the two of them as well as I think he should have for the friendship they supposedly had. And I think Xie Lian's realized that, but it's realizing it all too late. He's realizing just how little he was truly connected with the two of them by the time Mu Qing leaves. And now Feng Xin is going to be in love with this woman, and it's like, Xie Lian didn't think to ask him about it because he's like, oh, you're in a good mood. And he's like, oh, no. And he's like, really? And then he's like, is this the last packet? He's like, it is. If we don't go tomorrow, if we don't go bust, what will we do? And so then Xie Lian says, oh, you stay guard here. I'll think of a way. And he's like, don't mind me and don't follow me. Those two lines are Xie Lian for the next 800 years. Don't mind me. I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm just a little humble scrap collector. Don't follow me, because you'll be in trouble and you'll suffer bad luck if you do. Now, why would Xie Lian not want Feng Xin to follow him? I thought that originally it was Feng Xin. When I first was reading this, I thought Feng Xin was asking Xie Lian to go out tomorrow and don't worry about him, because it's been noted that Feng Xin's been disappearing for some amount of time while he's gone to get deliveries. Basically, he's been schmoozing on the job. Feng Xin's like, oh, I'll go get them like a pizza and their medicine. And then on the way, he stops by the girlfriend's house. And he's like, hey, I'm delivering pizza and medicine, but you want to hang out for like an hour? And doing that. So, which again, Feng Xin needs to live his own life. It totally makes sense. But the fact that the three of them were not communicating as well as they could have with one another is heartbreaking. And I think it would have made so much of a difference if they had than to keep each other in the dark until it blows up. Because that's essentially what's happening. But Xie Lian, what is he going to do? Why would he not want Feng Xin to follow him? Well, it's not busking, because he said that they kind of need two people to busk. So it's not that. He's not going to go busk. I think he's going to go steal. I think he's going to go steal medicine. And he doesn't want Feng Xin to follow him and see. I think the Xie Lian is going to try to steal some medicine and get it for himself to bring back, and he doesn't want Feng Xin to follow and get caught up in it. I think Xie Lian is going to become Cockaroo and steal from the grocery store like in Run with the Wind. The question is, will there be a Haiji show up to be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? We don't know what happened to Hua Chong. He just disappeared. Xie Lian told him not to follow him, but I don't know. If Xie Lian gets in trouble, who usually saves him? Well, in the present, Hua Chong saves him if he gets in trouble. And if Mu Qing's gone and Feng Xin's not there, who's going to rescue Xie Lian from anything bad happening? I mean, Hua Chong can't really do anything. He's a little will-o-wisp. But I don't know. But it just seems like it felt like I got like Haiji and Cockaroo vibes from Room with the Wind, where he's like, oh, don't follow me. Don't worry. I'm going to go get something. I guess we'll see. But these chapters bring up so many of the themes from the first couple volumes, but recontextualizing them from what we thought was like, oh, well, that was kind of bad, to no, it was really bad. Like, just really showing us, as only MXTX can, just how bad things are. And it hurts so much. But yeah, I didn't know how much discussion I would get out of this chapters. I got enough. Nearly an hour. But yeah, these two chapters went by really quick, and I almost debated reading the next set, but this volume is short enough, and there's not really a good stopping point. The next section is literally 3 chapters and like 40 pages, so I didn't want to split that up, but this was the saddest chapter set we've read so far, and I'm sure it's only gonna get better from here. Right? So next week we're going to be doing chapters 184, 185, and 186, pages 163 to 200 of Heaven Official's Blessing, and just see what that's like. No big deal. There also will be the Manhwa chapters. The Manhwa chapters coming out this weekend, which is really exciting, so I will get a chance to look at that. Yay! So I'm looking forward to it. Huzzah. So, in any case, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts down below and see what those are, because I nearly cried twice during this discussion, and once during the reaction, so it's coming. This doesn't go well, right? My question is, and this is, I don't want to answer this question, but the queen, we know her ashes end up in the mausoleum in Shanla. So how does that happen? How does she end up in the mausoleum if they're on the run? I don't know. I guess we're going to find that out. So we'll see. Haha. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Heaven Officials Blessing.